I'm a dumb guy, and I have some dumb questions about the 25-26 San Jose Sharks.
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young, caretaker at the Reef, also the co-host of Locked On NHL. I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen, proudly part of the Locked On Network. We cover your team every day. And if you want to be an everydayer, all you have to do, just follow along wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. And today we're going to be asking dumb questions that I have about your 25-26 San Jose Sharks, including, is the defense better equipped than it was last year? What happens if the Sharks get the first overall pick? And will the Sharks actually keep some veterans and start to build, as Mike Grier has said that he wants to do? So before we ask dumb questions, because I'm a dumb guy, I do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So these are kind of questions that I'm, as we cover the Sharks, and I think all of us are optimistic about the season of what we're going to see, and hope that this is a more productive season, and we see some more wins, and we see the young players do well, right? And that you're feeling like this thing is starting to turn the corner, especially after what we have witnessed since 2019, right? Of last time the Sharks made the playoffs in 2018-2019 season. It's been a lot of mediocre to bad to terrible hockey, to be honest. But there's still some questions that kind of pick at me, I guess, right? And I have dumb questions. And my mom always told me there's no such thing as a dumb question. I think I have some dumb questions here. So let's start by my first kind of question is the defense better equipped this year? Right? Going into last year, you had Jake Wallman, you had Cody Ceci, you had Mario Ferraro. You traded for Timothy Liljegren very early on. You had Marc-Edouard Vlasic. Yes, this wasn't some sort of great defense last year. And we know that Mike Grier has, that was literally one of the things he said he wanted to address this offseason was we have to get better on the blue line, right? We can't just roll out the same guys and let's hope it gets better. So do we think the Sharks have accomplished that, right? You went out and during the offseason, you signed Dmitry Orlov, you signed John Klingberg, you acquired Nick Leddy via waivers, you got rid of long-time, staple on the blue line and Marc-Edouard Vlasic by buying out the final year of his contract. You have Sam Dickinson in the mix. You brought back Mario Ferraro. You brought back Timothy Liljegren, who were both in the last years of their deal. And you have Shakir Mukhamadullin ready to make, to make a jump and be a full-time NHL player here. So on paper, you could say, I think the defense is projected to be better, right? And it's a pretty easy argument. If Orlov can be the Jake Wallman type of player where he just comes in and makes an immediate impact and be a two-way defenseman for you, and if Nick Leddy can be returned to form after a season that he lost a good chunk of the season because of injury, it just wasn't the same guy the second half of the season when he did come back because of his injury. And from the sound of it, he does sound like he's fully healthy, right? And if John Klingberg can bring back, find some of that magic. And I know he's dealing with a little bit of an injury here, but he says the hips feel good. And we saw even in the preseason game what he can do from the blue line from an offensive standpoint. And Mukhamadullin taking a full-time step here. And if Sam Dickinson can stick around, there's a really easy path for the Sharks defense to be better. But that's a lot of ifs, right? If John Klingberg can stay healthy, a guy who hasn't been able to stay healthy over the past couple seasons. And again, he had this hip resurfacing surgery to try to get back to being where he was before. But there's not a lot of guys who can come back from that. And we saw him play a little bit last year with the Oilers, but he played on a reduced role, third pairing type of minutes. And he's going to be asked to carry a lot of the load for the Sharks, right? Nick Leddy. I wrote about this in for my Reef. I've been doing these burning questions for every player. If Nick Leddy, he was, the big reason why he was such a successful defenseman was because of his speed. And last year he did not have that. It was a big time drop off for him for his top speed, how many times he hit his top speed. He was up among the NHL leaders when it came to top skating speed in the 23-24 season. Last year he was 50%. If Nick Leddy doesn't have the wheels, is he still an effective player? That's a big question. That's a pretty big question, right? And again, it sounds like he's healthy, but what if he can never get that back, right? And Father Time remains undefeated. It's not like Nick Leddy's 27; he's in his mid-30s, encroaching on his mid-30s right now. Dmitry Orlov, right? He's never had to be the guy. He's had John Carlson, like McAvoy, Jacob Slave. He said, every team he's been on, he's always had, always been kind of the Robin to somebody else's Batman. Is he going to be able to be the guy and be the best defenseman on a team? And right, we know this team is most likely not headed for the play. It would be a small miracle, I think, for this team to make the playoffs after what we've seen. But that's a lot of ifs for three veterans. And what if Sam Dickinson's not ready and has to go back to juniors because right, he can only play in the NHL or he can only play in the OHL. What if he's not ready and you have to send him back to juniors and wait another year for Sam Dickinson to make his impact? And what if Shakir Mukhamadullin, who's had trouble staying healthy, what if he can't stay healthy? And you see flashes of Mukhamadullin playing really well, but a guy who's spent the last two seasons where he's been unable to finish his seasons, is that, there's just a lot of ifs, right? So while I do think on paper this is a better equipped defense, and we kind of know what we're getting from Ferraro and Liljegren, where they're going to be perfectly cromulent defensemen, and Ferraro's going to drive you nuts every once in a while, and Liljegren's going to drive you nuts every once in a while. I think there is a lot of question marks for these other guys here, and we are hoping and assuming that they can return back to form or do something that they have not done before in the case of Dmitry Orlov. But how many things go wrong before you realize this defense isn't better than last year's defense, which Jake Wallman was excellent the first half of the season and then kind of dealt with an injury and then eventually got traded to the Edmonton Oilers. Cody Ceci, who kind of got thrusted in a role where he's been basically all of his career, where he's playing much more minutes than he probably should be playing, and kind of playing out of position where you would prefer to kind of cast him in. And Mark-Edward Vlasic, who's has been fighting Father Time for the past couple seasons, and just finally it looks like he just never kind of has been the same player over the past couple years because he's played a bajillion minutes throughout his career. And then unfortunately, as soon as he signs his new contract, just father time started hitting him with a baseball bat. Like there's a very easy path for this defense to not improve. And I'm not saying that that's the case, but there's not a lot of slam dunks, I think, and there's not a lot of for sure things on this defense that makes you feel like, yes, this is a better defense than it was last year. Do I think it'll be a better defense? I do think it'll be a better defense, but I'm also admitting there is a lot of ifs to it. So that's my first dumb question. Is this defense gonna be better? My second dumb question that we're going to get to here in just 1 second. What actually happens if the Sharks get the first pick of the draft? So we'll get to that here in just 1 second. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. The fun thing about FanDuel is it covers any way you like to play. You have player props, so if you want to maybe take Tua on the over interceptions, feels like a pretty safe one here for Monday night. You can build a same game parlay or even jump into live action as the game unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your favorite team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, guys, before we continue, of course want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. If you haven't yet, perfect time to subscribe. The season's here, right? We got preseason games, got a ton of preseason games next week. The season will be right around the corner. Of course, we'll have Barracuda coverage, plenty, and prospects because we do have the best prospect pool in the NHL. So we'll have all that stuff covered here at Locked On Sharks. Make sure you're following along wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. All right. Another dumb question. What happens if the Sharks get the first pick of the draft? All right, we'll kind of go about this from two ways. If one, they three-peat and they are the worst team in the NHL and they earn that right to be the first pick of the draft because they're just the worst. They're just bad again, which we do expect this team to not be good. But as I've stated several times, I don't think this is the worst team in the NHL. I do expect a good jump from in terms of wins and points from this team. And as we get closer to this season, we'll kind of hone in on that a little bit more. But what if this team is just like horrible again, right? And you go back to the first segment. What if the defense just collapses and Askarov's not good? And, whether Smith and Celebrini or Misa or whoever, the young players just don't make that leap. And, right, things just don't click for this team. And they're just the worst team in the NHL again this year. What do you do? Because we expect Gavin McKenna to be the first pick of the draft, and assuming he does what we expect him to do at Penn State, which is go on and have an amazing season at Penn State and dominate over there. And but the Sharks, so of course, right, this is a team that has invested a lot of assets into forwards. Macklin Celebrini, first overall pick. Michael Misa, second overall pick. Will Smith, a fourth overall pick. William Eklund, a seventh overall pick. That's four guys right there, and that doesn't include other first-round picks like Quentin Musty and Philip Beested, who is going to be making an impact here sooner or later, or high second-round picks like Cam Lund, Kasper Holtonen, Igor Chernyshov. Like the Sharks have invested a lot of high-end assets into this forward group. If you're Mike Grier and you go through another terrible season, right? One, do you have questions about Ryan Warsofsky? Two, Do you think the guys that you have are going to be the guys that you can quote unquote go to war with when it gets to the playoffs? And if you're not seeing improvement from this team, do you just take Gavin McKenna and figure it out later? Do you try to trade back? Do you take McKenna and then trade one of these other high-end guys, whether it's a Will Smith or an I would assume Smith and Eklund would be the two guys that you would look to potentially trade to try to figure out your defense group. Again, very much you pick the best player available, but do you put yourself in a position where you don't have to make that choice between Gav McKenna and you can maybe move back to potentially draft a defenseman, whether it's Keaton Verhoff or whomever. There's about 4 defensemen in the top 10 as of right now. We're very, very early in the process, right? I mean, the junior leagues have just kicked off. Like SHL has just started really. Like we're very early in the process, but there's looking like there's about 4 right-handed defensemen that are projected to go in the top 10. So the next year is going to be a good draft if you need defensemen. Last time I checked, the Sharks need more defensemen. So if the Sharks earn the right to be the worst pick, like, do you lose some faith in Grier and where this is going? And if he can build a team around these young stars, do you lose faith in Ryan Warsofsky? Do you lose faith in Askarov? Do you just say, kind of mark it off and say this was just a bad year? This team's going to get better eventually. Do you start looking at Landon DuPont tape for the 2027 draft? Like there's it's just again, like I don't expect this team to be the worst team in the NHL, but I'm just having a dumb question. What if they are the worst team in the NHL? Again, what do you do? And then, what if it's the Islanders type of situation where you're not the worst team in the NHL, but you luck out in the lottery, and then you get to pick. You're kind of in that same boat, right? And that's probably the best case scenario is you are, you see improvement. You see guys like Will Smith take a big step and Celebrini cements himself as a star and Askarov looks like he's the guy. But then you win the draft lottery. And if you're Mike Grier, do you have the stones to be the guy who trades Gavin McKenna, right? Or because that is a massive that takes right. I mean, because you hear Gavin McKenna, the next dude, right? The next guy, and the Sharks are set down the middle between Celebrini and Misa. You feel, especially if the season goes as we hope, you have Will Smith, you have Eklund. Do you just take Gavin McKenna and just say, we can roll out this ridiculous group in our top 6 and there's just nothing anybody can do about it? Or do you try to balance things out and look for somebody on the blue line and try to get that haul from a team like the Penguins, who are going to be desperately seeking the next superstar to replace Sidney Crosby or whoever is going to be? What do you do in that situation? Who knows? We may never have to answer this question, but it is a dumb question I keep coming up with is what do you do if you're Mike Grier and you're put into this situation where you do have the first overall pick? And especially, again, if everything goes poorly and I think it's easier to justify just taking Gavin McKenna if you're the worst team overall, right? If you're just the 3-peat, you're the worst team. We have the best odds. We win the lottery because we have the best odds. I think it's easier to justify because you can probably point to things that went wrong this season and say, Gavin McKenna can at least help us fix X, Y, and Z, right? Our power play stinks. Will Smith's not, the guy, whatever, right? But if you win the lottery and you get lucky, and you jump up from, say, 6th or 7th up to 1st, do you try to finagle that into something bigger where you can not only get a guy who maybe fits what you're looking for more in a Verhoff or et cetera, but then also get a bounty on top of it of picks or prospects or soon to be NHL players or young NHL players who are about ready to kind of explode. So, dumb questions I think about. So, we are going to continue asking dumb questions by looking at, do the Sharks start to build and keep some veterans? As again, Mike Grier has been looking to say that this year we're going to be building. So we'll get to that in just 1 second. All right, guys, before we finish, do of course want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen every day. For your second listen, go check out the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Steal and Flip, I provide daily fantasy tips to give you the edge over your league mates, all while making you a smarter hockey fan. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, so we're finishing up here with dumb questions I have, because again, self-proclaimed idiot with a microphone. Do the Sharks look to just re-sign some of their veterans? So we know going into next season, the Sharks are once again going to have $1 bajillion in cap space. They're scheduled to have $62.6 million in cap space going into next year, with a roster size of 9 players. And that doesn't include, right, we know like Sam Dickinson's going to be on the roster next year. Michael Misa's going to be on the roster next year, but those are both minimum contracts, right? Colin Graff is going to be due a raise. We'll see with guys like Dellandrea and Kurashev, who are both RFAs. The hope is Shakir Mukhamadullin, who's an RFA, can earn himself a nice little contract. But the Sharks have Dmitry Orlov is the only defenseman under contract for next year. So how does Mike Grier, who again, right, we heard this offseason, that was kind of the theme of the offseason, right? We don't want to tear this thing down like we did. And that doesn't mean just keep everybody just to keep everybody. But if guys are playing well in this system and helping to provide a winning culture and, feel like that they can be some bridge type of players while you wait for some of your prospects to develop. Guys, I think like Alex Nedeljkovic, for example, I think is a perfect guy. If he comes in here and plays how we expect him to play, and if he can play anywhere near how he played with the Penguins last year, I think that's a guy that you should look to extend defensively. Yes, I know Klingberg, both Klingberg and Leddy are guys who are probably looking to go elsewhere and try to win. But like John Klingberg, if Klingberg is playing really well here, fits into what the Sharks are doing, and feels like he can continue to do it for, the next season or two, shouldn't you try to keep John Klingberg's services? Right? Like having good hockey players on your team is not a bad thing. And the Sharks need more good hockey players. Same thing with Jeff Skinner. Right. And I know Skinner and Klingberg are both kind of in the same situation where they have no trade clauses until the end of January. And then they open things up. So that way, if those guys want to try to go to a contender, but if Jeff Skinner walks in here and has got 25 goals by the time of the trade deadline, and maybe teams are offering for him, but shouldn't you be like, Jeff, yes, I know we have guys like Musty and Chernyshov who are going to be banging down the door here, but right, you're playing with Macklin and you're playing with Will Smith, and things are going really well here. We'd love to have you stay on and help us, continue to grow and build this thing. I know Jeff Skinner's played on a lot of horrible teams and didn't get his first taste of playoff success until last year. But, as much as, maybe getting a second round pick or a third round pick for Jeff Skinner would be nice, wouldn't it just be nice to also have just Jeff Skinner here as for a team that we expect to hopefully by next year start to at least sniffing playoff contention? That way, again, you don't have to go into the offseason where you're kind of, I don't want to say hamstrung, but you're not going to the offseason saying, well, I got to spend $40 million in cap space just to get to the cap floor. And yes, I know Eklund's contract goes through, and you're going to have to eventually pay Macklin and Will here. And those guys are going to be, projecting to make big time contracts. But even if you sign those guys to extensions next offseason, those don't kick in until the following year, right? That 27-28 season. You're going to have to spend some money this offseason. And if guys are here and they're playing well and they feel like they are going to, at least continue to play at or near that level for, the next couple seasons, shouldn't the Sharks look to try to keep some guys around so that way we're not doing this whole same song and dance of, well, we brought in 4 new defensemen this offseason. Let's hope they all kind of work out. And then because yes, I know the Sharks have some fun prospects, but I mean, Luca Cagnoni feels like he's a lock to be on the roster for the 26-27 season, and Sam Dickinson and Shakir Mukhamadullin. But one, that's a lot of young defensemen. And 2, you still need some veterans around, and you need some other guys, and you need some depth. And those guys, what if their seasons don't go as planned, right? So again, I just think if you're Mike Grier and the theme of this season is to start to build and start to exit this rebuild and start to move forward, maybe not trading everything that's bolted down. So that way, Celebrini and Smith and Eklund and all these other young players, they have quality teammates, right? That they can continue to grow this thing. And as you're kind of putting a level for your Musties and your Chernishovs and these other young players coming in, where you have to at least, right? You have to be better than Jeff Skinner to take his job. You have to be better than than John Klingberg to take his job as the number 1 power play quarterback. If you're Luca Cagnoni, you have it kind of sets the bar for some of these players. You're not just handing guys jobs. And I think that's you're kind of creating that culture of competition, which I think makes everybody better. It makes us a better roster. So again, just some dumb questions. Dumb guy with dumb questions. So we'll see. None of these questions that, we may not even have to answer some of these questions, but they're just things that I've been kind of pondering and thinking about as we're starting to kind of gear up for this new season. So that's going to be it for me today. We'll be back tomorrow. Most likely going to start kind of getting ready for, since we got game on Friday, we'll look at who's, hopefully projected to be playing, kind of things to watch in this next preseason game, as hopefully Vegas has some real NHL players, so we can kind of see what's going on, get a little bit better of a yardstick type of performance. So, but yeah, we'll be back. So make sure you follow along wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. Follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and on TikTok. Follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at my fry hole. Until tomorrow. Bye, friends.